There is a scene repeating right now in millions of homes. A 4-year-old holds a tablet with a dexterity their grandfather will never have. They swipe, choose, pinch, switch apps. Nobody taught them. And yet, something in that image should disturb us more than it dazzles us. Because that child is being formed inside a technology no educator in history designed, foresaw, or could imagine. Bring back for a moment the 10 most influential thinkers in the history of education and learning. Sit them, today, at the back of that room to watch. Piaget, who studied his own daughters when the word screen meant a cloth for projecting silent film. Vygotsky, who died before the rotary phone even existed. Montessori, who ordered rooms of wood and silence. Dewey, Freire, Bruner, Gardner, Skinner, Ausubel, Bandura. 10 minds that built the theories with which we still educate our children. And here's the discomfort almost no one wants to name out loud. All those theories, without exception, describe a child who no longer exists. Formal education keeps operating with exquisite maps, drawn with enormous rigor, for a territory that disappeared. Piaget's child took years to reach abstract thought. Today's child at 9 explains to an artificial intelligence how to do their homework better. It is not that the theorists were wrong. Their ideas are splendid. They remain true. The problem is subtler and deeper. The children are different. And that single difference, the child who changed while the theories stood still, changes absolutely everything. So let us run the experiment for real. Resurrect the 10. Let them land in actual classrooms of this decade. Let them observe for 3 days, adapt their ideas for 3 days, and then propose. With one question guiding all of them. What would each of them do, with all their genius intact, facing a generation that learns, distracts, and builds itself inside a screen that never stops moving? Start with those who put the child's body at the center of everything. Montessori, Dewey, and Piaget agreed on something that for them was almost sacred. In early childhood, you do not learn by watching. You learn by doing. Touching, pouring water from one vessel to another, stacking cubes, being wrong with your hands. Montessori designed what she called prepared environments. Every object in the room existed for a reason, to provoke an exact discovery. Nothing, absolutely nothing, was there by chance. Now picture Montessori in her coat with her clinical gaze watching an infinite feed for the first time. She would recognize with a shiver that it is also a prepared environment, designed with surgical precision, calculated to the millisecond. But she would notice the decisive difference. Hers was prepared to develop the child. This one is prepared to retain them. It is not the same. It is almost the opposite. Dewey would say it in other words. We learn from experience, yes, but only from the experience that transforms us and leaves us different. Swiping a finger 1,000 times on glass is not experience. It is repetition. And repetition without purpose does not educate. It only passes time. The error, the 3 would say, is not the screen itself. The error is confusing movement with activity, and confusing constant stimulus with real learning. Continue with those who understood before anyone that no child learns alone. Vygotsky formulated it with a luminous idea, the zone of proximal development. A child can go much farther than they would go alone, if beside them there is someone who knows a little more and accompanies them. Learning, before it is individual, is deeply social. But today that someone who knows more is not always a present teacher or an attentive parent. More and more it is an algorithm, and an algorithm does not accompany. It recommends. The difference looks small, but it is an abyss. The teacher takes you where you cannot yet go. The algorithm takes you where you already were, again and again. And beside Vygotsky would sit Bandura, the theorist of learning by observation. Children, he showed, learn by imitating models, copying those they admire. His question for our age would be brutal in its simplicity. Whom is your child imitating right now when they believe no one is watching? Because the model is no longer the neighbor or the teacher or the older sibling. Too often it is a stranger on a screen. Someone optimized with enormous resources to capture their attention, not to form their character. And the child cannot yet tell the difference. Turn to the architects of the mind. Bruner insisted on something technology seems to have decided to erase: the value of effort, of guided discovery, learning costs. And that cost is not a failure of the system, it is the mechanism itself. Bruner spoke of scaffolding, a support that is withdrawn little by little, so that one day the child holds alone the construction they could not hold before. The goal of the scaffold is to disappear. But the instant answer breaks exactly that. When any doubt is resolved in one tap, productive friction disappears, the struggle where real learning happens. Ausubel would complete it with precision. Learning is only meaningful when the new anchors in what the child already knows. Without that anchor, information enters and slides off. And a large part of what a child consumes today is 15-second fragments, without root, without continuity, without connection between one and the next. Data that enter, shine for an instant, and evaporate without a trace. A lot of information, very little knowledge. Knowing is not the same as having seen. Gardner, however, would bring a hopeful nuance into the room. His theory of multiple intelligences reminded us that there is not one single way of being intelligent. There is a musical intelligence, a spatial one, a bodily one, an interpersonal one. Traditional school, obsessed with 2 or 3, denied them to entire generations. And technology, well used, could finally honor that diversity. Give the child who thinks with their hands or with sound paths the classroom never opened. The problem is that almost the entire current screen pushes in one direction: fast, passive consumption. Many different minds, one mold for all of them. And we arrive at the most uncomfortable of the 10, Skinner, the behaviorist, the one who studied with legendary coldness how reinforcement shapes the conduct of a living being. Skinner would not be surprised for a second. He would recognize the feed instantly because the feed is, literally, his laboratory taken to a scale he never dreamed. Variable reinforcement, that unpredictable reward that keeps the pigeon pecking and the player in front of the slot machine, is the exact motor of every swipe downward. You do not know what the next video will be. Sometimes it is boring, sometimes it is fascinating. And that uncertainty, Skinner proved, is the most addictive thing that exists. The difference is not in the technique. It is in the purpose. Skinner dreamed of using reinforcement to teach, to accelerate learning. Industry uses it to retain. The same law, inverted in its intention. And that is why, at the end, we need the most political of all: Freire. Freire wrote against a visible oppression, that of the peasant who could not read the word or the world. Today, that oppression learned to camouflage itself. It no longer forbids information. It floods you with it. It no longer silences the child. It distracts them, gently, until they stop asking. Freire called banking education the kind that deposits data in a passive mind, like filling an empty account. The feed is banking education perfected. Without a teacher, without a limit, and without the child noticing they are only receiving. His antidote would still be exactly the same as half a century ago: critical consciousness. Teaching the child not only to use the screen, but to read it. To ask every video, every recommendation, every app, who made you? What do you want from me? What do you gain from my attention? That is reading the world. And then, when the 10 have watched their 3 days, something remarkable happens, something almost no one expects. They do not contradict one another. They complete one another. None of the 10 would say, turn everything off, throw the devices away, go back to the past. Because none of them was ever a nostalgic. All of them were, in their time, radicals of innovation. Montessori used materials that scandalized the schools of her age. Dewey turned the classroom into a living workshop. Freire took literacy where power did not want it to arrive. None of them feared the new tool. They feared, all of them, one thing: the tool without criterion. Powerful technique without a present adult who turns it into encounter instead of abandonment. And that, exactly that, is the thesis of early technoeducation. It is not about choosing between the classics and technology. It is about reading technology through the classics. Use Montessori to ask whether this digital environment develops the child or only retains them. Use Vygotsky so they are never left alone in front of the machine. Use Bruner and Ausubel to demand effort and meaning, not instant answers. Use Skinner to recognize in time when we are being manipulated. And use Freire to teach the child to read the world hidden behind the screen. The 10, together, are not a museum. They are a compass. Because the question, in the end, was never how many hours of screen. That is the easy question. The stopwatch question. The real question is another. And it is harder. With what intention it is used. With what quality of content. And above all, with what adult beside them. The same screen that isolates, accompanied, can become encounter. The same technology that distracts, guided with criterion, can become development. The tool is neither good nor bad. It is the absence of an adult that makes it dangerous. And all of this matters much earlier than we usually believe. Because it is in the first years that the brain decides, almost forever, what deserves its attention and what deserves its effort. A child accustomed from early on only to instant reward will have to row against their own biology later, to tolerate the slow effort of really learning. That is why it is not enough to form children who know how to use technology. That, in fact, they learn alone, almost without help. The challenge is deeper. It is about forming children whom technology cannot use. Children who direct the tool instead of being directed by it. The 10 theorists did not fail. They simply wrote, with genius, the first half of the map. The half of the child who learned in a world of objects and of people. The second half, that of the child who now grows inside a screen, is not in their books. It could not be. That half is ours to write. All of this, the 10 theorists landing in today's classroom, and a concrete method to accompany a child in this era, is developed chapter by chapter in the book Early Tecnoeducation. If you want to go deeper into this gaze, read through The Great Pedagogues. The link to get it is in the pinned comment. And let us stay, to finish, with the only question none of the 10 would ever have answered with an easy moral. When your child looks at a screen, in that quiet instant, who is educating whom?